Hey, what's up guys? Johnny here with Team Legit. Today we're going to do the build video for the Legit Wing 36. Okay, so we've got all the components here in front of us in the box. We're going to crack the box open. We're going to take everything out. We've already done a boxing video so you can see what everything is included. We did include a little checklist, so make sure you go through the checklist and you get all the components out. Alright guys, after you get all your components out on your workbench, we're going to go ahead and start the build. The first thing we're going to do is prep. We're going to prep the airframe for assembly. So each airframe comes in a block type shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it up into two pieces and then we're going to rip the cores out of the foam. We include the wing beds in all of our builds, and the reason for that is when you're building an aircraft on a flat surface and the aircraft has airfoil and different functions to it, and you start putting pressure on it during laminating process or building process, you could tend to warp the wing where it will never fly correctly ever again. So we're going to rip the two cores out. When you do take them out of the wing cores, do take note of the top and the bottom. These are different from each other. So I like to take a marker here and mark them. So if you look at the airfoil here, it's got a little bit more or taller airfoil on the top. So that's going to be the top of your wing. So I'm just going to put a little arrow in here pointing up, saying that's the top. And then if you check your wing beds, the top wing bed has a little more sweep to it as well. As you see, that fits in there nice and neat. So I'm just going to go ahead and write top. As you will note, the two top and bottom wing beds don't match up, so you can kind of differentiate that way. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this as top and bottom. And we're going to put these aside for now. Don't throw these away. Next, we're going to take out our blunt section. Same thing, we're going to peel it out of the foam. And again, mark them as bottom and top. So we'll put these guys aside. First thing you'll notice once you get your wing cores out, it kind of looks a little fuzzy. It looks a little bit hairy, and it also looks like there's additional residue on there. And that's because when the wire is cutting through here, it tends to smear the EPP. So what we're going to want to do is clean that up. We want to get this as nice and clean as possible for several different reasons. If you decide to paint your wing, it's not going to look right with all these little hairs that keep popping up. And also when you go to glue and laminate, it's not going to stick to the foam correctly. So what I like to do is take the two pieces and rub them together. As you guys can see, most of the hairs just come off nice and easily. And then you can flip it over and do the top. Once you get majority of the foam off, then you can go through and take the rest of it off. If you like to take a sanding block, you can make your life a little bit easier. I actually like to use higher grit sandpaper just to get majority of that stuff off. I'm going to be using the, looks like 80 grit, and you don't want to be too rough with it. All we're trying to do is get the additional residue off of the foam. Alright guys, for those of you following at home, so we've got the airframe cleaned up pretty nice and tidy. I forgot to mention, make sure you do this outside. It gets pretty messy. If you give it about 20-30 minutes of love with the removal of all the different hairs, then you'll get a nice clean aircraft. Alright, so here's where some of you guys may begin with your assembly. I'm going to do mine the way I like to do it. I like to make my airframes as clean as possible. So what I like to do is I like to install my servos first and run my wires to my different bays or where those bays are going to be, and then glue my aircraft together. The reason for this is once you glue the aircraft together, it's very difficult to run channels or tubes. An alternative method would be is you place your servos after you've glued everything together, and then you start hollowing out and cutting out bays in different channels. But like I said, when I build mine, I like to run all of the tubes within the foam. Now this takes a little bit of skill, so if you haven't tried this, don't attempt it your first time. And if you don't feel confident with it, I would do the alternative method, which we'll also show you afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my holes. First of all, I'm going to take my 2 elevons. I'm going to measure approximately where my servos are going to go. I hope to have the diagram up that you guys can actually download before you install your accessories or before you purchase your build, where it will show you where the different components can go. You can take the PDF files, print them out, tape them together, and have a map of where you should cut things out. I will let you know that these wings tend to be tail heavy, so I urge you to put all of your electronics as far forward as possible. They will balance out with a nice 2700 to 3300 milliamp battery. It is also designed to carry FPV gear, so if you're going to fly it line of sight, you got to make sure that all your gear is far forward. You may have to actually add some weight to it. Again, the FPV gear was thought of when we went to build these wings. Okay, now before we run the servos, I'm going to show you guys how I like to line up my servos. You're going to take your pre-cut elevons and line them up to where they're going to go, and I just pretty much get a rough idea of where they're going to be. Hopefully the outline will show you guys where exactly to put your servos. You've got some nice long control rods, so you can run these servos, you know, even off front of the aircraft if you wanted to, but we're not going to do that. I like to take my ruler and I want to put my control horn somewhere in the meat of the elevon. I don't like to leave it too far to the edges, and I don't want to go too far forward either, because I don't want to get into the reflex of this elevon. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount that up. We're going to find out where our elevon is going to go. Your reflex is about 1/4 of an inch away from the connection point for where the elevon touches the wing. So I'm going to go about 1/2 an inch in. Very small little mark right there. I'm going to go about 2 inches in there. So to me, that's a pretty good point of where to put my control horn, and that is also included in the kit. So we know that the elevon is going to go through here. So your control rod at this point doesn't really matter how far down you go, because we're just doing measuring. Now some guys like to run the control rod 90 degrees perpendicular to the actual elevon, and some guys like to run it 90 degrees perpendicular to the aircraft. It doesn't really matter, because we're not going to be doing that much reflex. There isn't going to be that much movement in the elevons. You just need very little. So if you want to make it look clean, parallel to the edge of the wing and to the center section of the wing, or if you want to go more precise, you can make it diagonal. I'm going to go straight because it's easier for me. So we've got that guy lined up. We know that our elevon is going to be parallel to the actual wing. So I'm going to put my ruler here, and we know it's going to intersect about 6 inches. So your elevon is going to travel, is going to cut through the actual airframe at about 6 inches from the inner connection point. So let's go ahead and mark that. So now that we've got how far in we go and about where it's going to line up, we're going to measure it up forward and back. So I want to give myself something, a reference point. So I'm going to use this point of the actual aircraft and go into about 7 inches, which will put my servo here. So we're going 7 inches forward from the very point right here. So 7 inches forward. Or if you want to measure it from the front, you're about 2 1/4 inches from the leading edge back, and about 6 inches from the inner side. So if you measure 6 inches from here and draw an imaginary line, and then 2 1/4 inches straight back from this parallel to the actual leading edge, you will find your point where we're going to include the servos. So now what that does is if I go here and I go 7 inches up from the corner piece here, completely parallel with the elevon, and just put a point there. So now if we go over here and we go about 7 inches forward, puts you about here, and we go 6 inches inwards from the inside, is going to put us about here, and we want to make sure we're about 2 inches from the leading edge. Puts us roughly in the same area, actually the exact same area as the servo before. And again, guys, these plans will help you out. So let me just put that back over there and just double check. So we're about 7 inches forward from this point right here. And that puts us here. And then we're about 6 inches away from that line, which then puts us at this point right here, which, to double check, will give you about 2.5 inches from the leading edge. So if I do that over here, the 2.5 inches from the leading edge is right about there. And then if we go forward 7 inches from this point right here, puts us on this imaginary line. And if we go 6 inches in, puts us right where the servo is going to go. So we're going to put our other servo there. So now that we know where our servos are going to go, now you can actually measure them up and trace around them to cut out the area. So we've got our control rod. Again, we know our control rod is going to connect to here. So what we're going to do is take the very point of our servo, so right about there, and line it up. And if we put the very point of our servo, the very back corner where the wire is, right to that dot, and then line up the actual servo movement, that'll give us a good reference point of where our servo is going to go. And I like my servos to run parallel to the aircraft. So what you could do here is trace out your servo, or give yourself a corner of where your servo is going to go. Remember, you need to leave some space for the actual servo arm to move and actually be included. So there's a pretty good idea of where my servo is going to go. And if we do it back again over on this side, so I'm taking my two elevons, inverting them, and giving me a general marker of where my left elevon is going to go. So we'll line that guy up there. We'll take my servo, use the top corner here to trace my servo, and actually these line up perfectly. So now that we've got that, I'm going to show you guys how to dig out your servo bays. Alright, so what I've got here is a Dremel tool, and I've got the routing bit on there and also the depth indicator. So this allows me to go a certain depth in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my servo, so I'm just going to eyeball it and go a little bit deeper than the actual servo, and it's actually pretty close there if you can see. Alright, so before we start cutting in with the router, what I like to do is take a sharp blade and actually trace the lines that we're going to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out where the servo is going. What this will do is give you a more precise router. Instead of using the router to try to figure out your angles and get your line straight, cutting it out quickly with the blade will ensure that the channels where your servos are going to go are cut out a little bit more accurate. Alright, so I've traced out my bays with my blade, and I'm going to show you how it looks when we start routing it. Again, guys, this is a little bit messy, so be sure to be in an area that can be easily cleaned up. Don't do this in your living room or your bedroom, because you're going to be getting EPP bits all over the place. Also, try not to inhale with your mouth. I've done that before. When you're cutting this up, it gets into little particles, and I went and I swallowed a piece of EPP. It was not fun. So just be careful when you're using this. If you have a face mask, even better. Safety first. Alright guys, we want to get the rest of our bays cut out, but before we do that, we want to make sure that our sparring rods are not interfering with where our components are going to go. So for the main spars, you're going to have a total of 6 spars included in your kit. You're going to have 2 longer spars. These spars are going to run along the main section of the aircraft, and I'll show you where these go in just a few moments. But the ones we're concerned with right now are your front supporting rods, your leading edge supporting rods. The best way to do this is line up that rod to the very edge of your aircraft. Take your ruler and mark about 1 inch forward. Now most rulers are about 1 inch wide. Like this ruler here is about 1.5 inches. So this will give you a good idea of about how far away to go with your supporting spars. Now, 1.5 inches back is pretty fair. You can actually go with that measurement. So what I could do in this case is just use my ruler to give me an idea of where my spar is going to go. And we're going to line it up to the very edge right here. We're going to mark that. So we're going to mark here. All I'm doing right now is just marking my spars. So now you have 2 points where your spars are going to go. And the reason for that is if you put an imaginary line between these 2 spars, you don't want to put anything over those spars. So with our battery being here, we can go as far forward as about here safely and run the battery bay here. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give myself an outline real quick. So I know I need about this much space for our battery. So that gives me about here and here to use for my VTX. Again, with placing your equipment, you want to go as far forward as possible. Now, this is not a long-range aircraft. It's not meant to be a long-range aircraft. It's meant for sport flying. So you don't really need to worry about too much separation because most guys would be running 5.8. You're going to have about 12 to 13 inches of separation. There's also going to be a battery in between the two. If you're very concerned about FPV gear and with your long-range setup and keeping things separated, you can always use the little bit of space that's going to be available back here or here. For my purposes, I'm going to put my VTX, I'm going to put my RX here and my VTX here. Okay guys, as you can see, I went ahead and added a couple extra squares here. You may be saying, what are those for? What we've done here is, as you can see, we've already put our spars here. We've marked it about 1 inch, 1.5 inches away from the leading edge. And this is where our supporting spars are going to go. We're going to have a bay here. This is where my receiver is going to go. I always like to put the receiver on the right-hand side because my VTX and video gear goes on the left-hand side. And you may be asking, well, can it be interchangeable? Yes, but however, the GoPro pod that we have puts the GoPro camera more center and your video camera off to the left a little bit. So you want to run less wires rather than crossing them over. So we're going to put our video gear on the left side and our receiving gear on the right side. So as you can see, I've pretty much outlined the little pocket, the bay that we're going to be putting my VTX in. It's a little bit small on this side, so I may go a little bit wider. And we've got our X4R, our FR Sky, the aircraft that I'm building here is going to somebody that does fly using Tyrannus. So I've cut out a little bay here, and I can go quite a bit smaller on the receiver side, but I've given myself a little bit of space in case I want to maybe run a Dragon Link or a larger receiver later on down the line. So again, the same method with the router. What we're going to do is we're going to take our blade, alright guys, so as you can see, we've cut out our bays here that we're going to be running for our FPV gear. Same thing, I'm going to take the router. Pretty much the depth that the servo goes in is pretty adequate for the FPV gear. You may want to go just a little bit deeper. So I'm going to adjust the routing bit just a little bit smaller. Alright, we're going to route out our FPV gear. Alright guys, you can see we've got our pockets cut out for our FPV gear, so our VTX can fit nice and clean in here, and our X4R fits nice and snug in there. We've got plenty of meat on the bottom of the airfoil, and we've got all of our bays pretty much cut out, and that didn't take us much time at all. So one thing that differentiates this aircraft from the racers and things like that, it's got this nice big area here for a nice large battery, nice big bay. So what we're going to do here is I'm not going to channel out all the little holes like I would normally with the racers, where I kind of burrow all the holes and run everything out before we glue beforehand, because we've got little pockets we can run all the wiring through. Okay guys, now we've got all of our bays and everything corrected. Now would actually be an okay time to go ahead and start gluing. So what we could do is glue the halves together. And then because we're going to have a nice big bay right here, we can actually take a coat hanger or a piece of steel rod, heat it up with a torch, and run all of our bays underneath and connect them to each other. So we know we're gonna need to run a servo line all the way from here across and into the receiver bay, and this guy can just kind of just cut through there and get into here. We know that we're going to run our VTX directly to where the camera goes, but again, since we have these nice bays, we can just leapfrog into the different bays. So now comes the gluing part. Okay guys, to glue the wing beds together, it's very simple. Just take some hot glue, put a nice little bead down the thin section right here, get a little bit more in the thicker parts. We're going to take the center section and just stick it in there, get it nice and stuck, and then line it up. Now the top and the bottom may not line up sometimes, but you want to make sure that the top lines up, and you want to make sure you line up with this curve right here too. This is it's not critical, but it is important to get this straight, because if this is not straight, then the rest of your build may or may not come out straight as well. So once that's dried up, we're going to add some to the other side. Now with the hot glue, you do have a second or two to, kind of adjust things, but it does dry pretty quickly. Again, be mindful that the bottom of this area may not line up. It's the inside, the bed part is that you need to make sure it lines up. And you only have to hold that together for about, a minute, the max. So once our hot glue is dried up, we've got a nice little bed to work in. Okay, so we've got some T-pins here. T-pins are going to be used for holding the wings together after we've gooped them. So I've got my bottle of goop right here. I'm going to take the sharp tip off, and we're just going to go crazy with this goop in here. And as I'm putting quite a bit on there, I'm using the tip to kind of rub it in and get it secured on there pretty good. Don't be shy with the goop. Let it bleed off the edges, let it bleed off the sides. It's perfectly fine. At this point, goop is your friend. Okay, so we've got quite a bit of goop. And we're going to take our pieces, just kind of work them together, get the goop to bleed out the sides. You'll notice back here that there is a cut in your motor mount area. Alright, so we've got that goop on there pretty nice and secured. We're going to let that sit for a second while we do the other side. Alright, as you guys can see, we got lots of goop on there. And then now we're going to, this center section should be on there pretty good, but I would hold the center section and the actual wing while I manipulate this stuff on here. Because as you can see on the other side here, it's kind of starting to move, but that's okay, we've got time with the goop. So get that in there, squish it together nicely. Anything that seeps out, you can just pull, sink back in there. Again, this is very important to get this lined up straight. So what I like to do, put it in the wing bed, get the goop to line up nice and straight. Make sure that our top airfoil is nice and smooth, like we have here. Okay, now that we've got the wing pressed together nice and tight and fitting in here, we're going to take some of these T-pins and just push them in here in an angle to hold the pieces together. If you notice any gaps between the goop between the two pieces, that's okay. Just try to keep them nice and tight, and being in the wing bed will help them stay in position so they're not moving around or flopping over or hanging out. And if you get to that point, all you do is take some more goop in those spots and seal it nice and tight. As long as you get enough goop in there, it will seal. So what happens with the goop when it's drying is it actually sucks the foam together. I'm not too concerned about the areas over the battery bay, because we're going to cut those out. But I do want to make sure that the aircraft is straight, that the front is straight, that the connection pieces here are good, and there's no steps coming off the edges here. So we want to make sure that it flows nice and smooth and there isn't any lips. All right. Okay guys, so we're going to let this dry. We're going to come back in about 45 minutes. 45 minutes should give it plenty of time to cure. It won't be fully dry, but it'll be nice and dry to the point where we can flip it over, check to see if we need to add some goop to the bottom seams. If we do, we will go ahead and do that. All right guys, it's been about an hour and I've let the goop dry up. It's gotten, pretty dry. I wouldn't say it's 100% cure, but it's definitely enough to where you can start working and continuing the build. So what I'm going to do is remove out all of my T-pins. They're very simple. Just give them a little bit of a twist and pull them straight out. They don't damage anything. Alright guys, moving on with the build. So now we're going to go ahead and put in our spars. So our spars are fairly simple to put in. There's, again, in this method, there's going to be a couple choices you have to make in the type of glue. I personally like goop. Again, like I said, it shrinks when you put things together, so it tends to seal and hug things down pretty nice and tight. We had already measured that one of our spars is going to go across right here. So we've got it marked, and we know that that's going to be the line of where it's going to go. So I'm going to grab the pen and just give it a nice light score. So we've already marked this side where the one spar is going to go, and we're going to go ahead and come around to the other side. We're going to do the same thing. So we've got our spars marked. I personally like goop, so I use the flat blade and I just pretty much make a nice incision here, and then I will work my spar in there, or I'll take a screwdriver and just kind of soften it up in the area where the spar is going to fit, just to give it a little bit of room to sit. And then I'll pull it back out and I'll fill it with goop, and I'll show you how I do that. What some other people do is they'll take a soldering gun, like this guy here. This is another way to do the build. You can take the soldering gun, let it get nice and hot. Again, be careful when you breathe these chemicals. They're not good for you, so put on a mask or do it in a well-ventilated area. And you can just basically take the soldering gun and score the whole entire channel and make a nice, 1/4 of an inch deep channel for your spars. You can then drop them in, make sure they fit correctly. Take some Gorilla Glue, the brown or white Gorilla Glue, and pour some in there. Put your spar in there, get it nice and fit, roll it around a little bit, get it nice and gooped up in there, and then take a water bottle and just give it some sprays, and then that will foam up and it'll take up the rest of the cavity. It'll look a little bit different. But I personally like to use goop, and for the sake of this video, I'm going to use goop. So I'm going to go ahead and score this and cut it down. I'm not going very deep, about 1/4 of an inch deep, just enough to stick the spar in there. Okay, so I've got my screwdriver here. You got a Phillips or a flat, doesn't really matter. What the screwdriver is going to do is just open up the cavities. And then you can go ahead and dry fit them. And you'll see they go in kind of tough. They don't want to go in there very well. But what we're going to do is we're going to force them in. So as you see here, I've got the spar in here already in place. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side here. And if you kind of get the spar to sit in place, you can kind of just wiggle it. Give it a little bend and wiggle it in there. Don't worry if it's really rough to get it in there, because once you goop it, the goop acts as a lubricant and it actually literally drops right into place. So now that this is all in there, it's nice and smooth. We got that guy in there. What we're gonna do is take our goop. We will have some of this available on our website soon. And it comes with a sharp tip. So what that does is it helps make things really, really simple in getting into those tight holes. So I'm gonna pull my spars back out. And then this guy can just go right in there. Also, if you guys buy the goop from Walmart, Walmart sells the goop bottles with the sharp tip already. Be careful when you're coming around your base here. There isn't much foam to push back, so it'll kind of flex a little bit. Again, we want to get quite a bit of goop in there. We want the goop to go all the way down in there and fill some of the cavities. And go back and check out any spaces where you think the goop didn't get in enough. Alright, so once you got the goop in there, kind of line it up in there, and as you see, when I stick this spar in there, some of that goop is seeping out and around the sides, which is a good sign, meaning that we have enough goop in there, and it just literally just sinks right in there. Alright, so we've got that in there. I'm going to go back to the other side. Put a lot on the edges. Alright, and we're going to get our next spar sunk in. I always start from the edge because I know how much it needs to go out. And as you guys can see, the goop pretty much lubes it up and it just drops right in. So now that's in there nice and snug. I'm going to take the goop and I'm going to go back over the actual spar. Any places where the foam has separated, you want to add an extra amount of goop. Alright, so now that I've got that there, I'm going to take my finger. Goop's pretty safe, so you don't have to worry about it. Unless you have some kind of allergies, don't blame me. But go ahead and just take your finger or a flat edge and just push the goop in there nice and tight. Same thing with the other side. Okay guys, I've finished up the front leading edge spars for the 36. Now we're going to install the center spar. And you do this the same way. What you want to do pretty much is just grab your motor mount. Make sure your motor mount is clearing the spar. In my case it is. And then you can move it up forward. You want this spar to pretty much touch both of the other spars or come very, very close to touching them. And then you want it to be parallel to the back of the wing here. So it's going to basically go across. And this guy will give you most of your strength on the horizontal axis. So this is pretty much where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and just put my ruler here. Again, draw it up with my pen. Just give it a nice light coat. Make sure it's correct. I like to measure to make sure that they're about the same. So I'm about 2.5 inches on this side, and it's actually a little bit less. So I'm going to make some adjustments. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to make sure that my lines are even. So I've measured 2.5 inches from back here, 2.5 inches back here, made a line, set up my ruler, and then I'm going to go through. And there we go. So then I'll keep my ruler here for now. Want to make sure we're cutting the right one. Okay, so I'm going to take my straight blade again. Alright, we've got that cut now. Again, we're going to take our screwdriver, just kind of work it in here. We're just basically loosening up the foam, opening it up a little bit, getting it ready to take the main spar. Again, we're going to do our dry fit. And the easiest way to get that in there is just kind of wiggle it, work it in there, and shove it all the way in there. Alright, so now that that guy's in there, you'll see that a lot of strength has already been added to the wing and it's not flexing as much anymore, but most of the strength will come when we do the same thing on the bottom. So as I glued in the leading edge spars, I'm going to go ahead and glue in the top spar. Then I'm going to flip my wing over and do the same thing on the bottom. Quick note about the goop, if you order it from us, you can get the tip applicator, and this is really good to put the goop in those different crevices and get that precision gooping. What I like to do is take my goop from the bottom before I even crack it open and just start rolling it like a toothpaste, so we can get that goop flowing out of here nice and fresh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the tip off, get myself a nice opening, and then I'm going to take my cap, pop it open. You'll see the goop, a little air pocket will come out. Thread this guy on there and start the gooping again. I'm adding a little bit of goop to the top here because that cut didn't open up nicely. So we're just going to add a little bit of goop to some of those spots. We're going to take our spar. And as you guys can see, that goop is seeping out of the top. And it just slides right in really nicely. All right, and then I'm going to go back over it with the goop. Okay, so I've put another layer of goop on top, and I'm just taking my finger, going through and filling all the pockets. Using this black spar, you can kind of see how much the spar is exposed. But again, like I said, this goop will just seep right into those cracks. It will grab both of the edges of the foam, just like stitches, just suck that shut, and you'll have very minimal gap, and it'll also hold the spar in place. So I'm not going to wiggle it or flex it or do anything like that for now. I'm going to give it about 10 or 15 minutes to dry. Once it's dried, I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the bottom. Alright guys, while I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I'm going to prep up my servos. What I've got here is a 5-volt BEC. This will simulate the power coming in from my receiver. So I've got that here, and I've also got a little servo tester. What this does is basically helps you with centering your servos. When you're going to glue down servos in your aircraft, you want to make sure that the servos are as center as possible. You can make fine-tune adjustments later, but you want to actually make sure that the control horns are as level as possible so they have equal amount of deflection forward and backwards. Another thing that I've also done is one of my servos need to be extended because it's going to be running across the wing. We've got the receiver on one side, the video transmitter on the other, but we've got servos on each side. So in my case, the left servo needs to be transferred across to the right side. So I went ahead and extended the wire here. And we're going to put these servos here in the middle. And it looks like they are there in the middle, and we're going to run quick check, and it looks like, yep, my servos are nice and centered. As you can see, they're both facing up and down. With the servo tester, it's hard to get them perfectly straight up and down, but you want to make sure you do all the manual stuff as much as possible first. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and tighten down the screws, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright guys, so after you've gone through and hollowed out your cavity, if you feel like it's too weak on the bottom, you want to straighten it up a little bit, you could use some of this E600. It's like welder's glue. It's pretty much similar consistency or similar composition of goop. However, it's very runny. So what I'm going to do is just take this stuff right here and just fill a nice coat of it down on the inside of the wing. You can use goop also, but the goop takes really long to dry. Really long to come out. This stuff is just really runny. It's kind of watery. And all this is going to do is seep down in all the little pores. And if you let it sit flat for a couple hours, it will make a nice flat bed inside the bay right here. And as you guys can see here on the right side of your screen, the goop has, or the welders has pretty much already kind of gravity fed themselves down into all the little cracks and crevices. And it's making a nice low bed. Now alternatively, if you guys want to cut all the way through, cut the block all the way out in the foam, you can do that. Cut it all the way out, cut it all the way through, and then just slice the bottom or the bed. So you would cut through the bottom, the whole block, pull it out of the wing, and then slice your bottom bed and goop that back in. You can always do that as well too. And then there's also another method if you guys want to cut it completely out, which I have done in the past, and taken a coroplast, a thicker coroplast similar to the winglets, and put that in here. You can add that into the bottom of it as well too to make it nice and solid. So as you can see here, the welders has made the nice flat clear bed in there. And you can go up the sides too if you want to here. Get in all those little corners. So we're going to give this a little bit of time to dry, and then afterwards we'll come back and move on to the next step, which is going to be cutting out the top here to make the framing for where the coroplast lid is going to go. So just go here, go through here, and as you can see, you see bubbles coming up, and those bubbles are pretty much air that was trapped in there. Those bubbles will come out. This goop will force itself down to the lower levels of the actual battery bay. And I don't want to lift this or touch it so none of that seeps out through the sides. Alright guys, while this goop is drying here, I'm going to make my shell. It's very simple. What you're going to do is you're going to take a nice straight edge, very clean blade, and we're just going to cut very thin layer. Actually, it's better if you score the outer box that we made very shallow. You don't want to go too deep. Literally just basically scoring the foam, not going that deep in there. And then you're going to take your blade and very carefully and as you see, if you already scored the outside here, this stuff should just flake right off. Guys, if your blade is nice and sharp, your cuts will come out nice and smooth. So our coroplast lid now should fit in that cavity right there, and as you can see, it does nice and flat. And we're going to go ahead and find our back of the bay. So that's about how big we got. And we're going to cut that piece. The great thing about cutting coroplast straight is you just go down the flute. There really is no magic to it. So once you cut through there, you can shave a little bit of the back of each flute off to get a nice flat straight cut. If it's in the middle of the flute, then you'll have to go a little more precise. So now we've got our battery bay all nice and cut out, and it looks like it needs a little bit of trimming here in the front, and you guys can do this as you go. At this point, we can go ahead and add some coroplast doors for our other side, for our electronics. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so it looks like we've got our VTX bay also done. And those guys will just go there and here. They'll just go here and here, cover up your electronics. If you need to get into them, you have access to them. But most of the time, these will just stay taped over. So we've got those done. We've got our main bay done. And now we're going to move on to the next part of the build. I'm going to give this a couple hours to dry because this welder's takes a little bit longer than the actual goop. But I do want to make sure, just a quick fit here, that my battery is going to clear. And it looks like, yes, it will clear. All right, guys, so we're going to move on to the next step. I'm going to go ahead and clean up my tabletop, let this dry for a little bit, and we'll be back. Okay guys, while we're waiting for the E600 to dry, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start on our motor mount. These motor mounts are really unique and they're very easy to install now. We've already went ahead and made the horizontal slit right on the thrust line, so all you have to do is make the final cuts of where they're going to go. Okay, so here's what you do. You take your motor mount, you've already made sure your spar goes across the front here, so you've got that pretty much the horizontal line. You've measured 2.5 inches and 2.5 inches, so you don't have to do too much more. Your motor mount's going to come a little bit cleaner than this one. This is actually a prototype. You just want to kind of have it there and make sure that it runs parallel. What I'm going to do is draw a quick line right about here and a line right about here on each side, because the motor mount should sit pretty flush right in the middle of this bracket. The bracket should fit pretty much flush in the middle of this blunt nose. Now the only reason I'm drawing this line and the two lines on the outside is when we cut this section out now, it's going to expose all of the holes for your motor mount. So this can't get any easier than it is now. If you want to go all the way through, you can, you don't have to. What I'm going to do is take the blade, cut the first part, cut the back part, and we're literally going to remove this entire chunk. Now I haven't gone all the way through to the bottom side yet, and generally you shouldn't have to. So as you can see, my motor mount fits in there nice and tight. This is where you'll add the secondary piece, whether you're going to run your motor inside or outside. It's here and available for you. I would run it on the inside if you're not running a big battery or FPV gear, because you won't need that much weight for the CG. So now that we've got that guy there, we're going to take this out. We're going to cut it all the way through. There it is. And now that we've got this cut all the way through, your motor mount should fit nice and snug right into the motor mount bay. And you'll just have to, if you'd like to, go ahead and bolt the top plate to the bottom plate for now, just so you can make minor adjustments. You can do that. But all you're going to do now is, once your motor mount is installed in there, you're going to take a screwdriver and pull out all the excess foam that was left in there from when we cut it. This will ensure a nice solid catch. There we go. And don't worry if this comes apart here, because we're going to goop that back in. So what you're going to do is you're going to fill this motor mount bay with tons and tons of goop, as much goop as you want to. And we're going to slide the motor mount in here, making sure that the holes are all lined up. And as you can see here, your motor mount is in there, nice and flush. And then we'll wait for that to dry. You want to make sure that the thrust line is straight. It's not in any kind of angles or anything like that. And that's where you would bolt this guy down, and you can now use the top L bracket to make any fine adjustments. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get a bunch of goop, fill it all up, stick my motor mount in there. If you'd like to use a clamp, you can go ahead and clamp it down and let it dry nice and tight. I would give this at least 4 or 5 hours with the goop, because you want to make sure that this guy is in there nice and dry and doesn't come loose, because this is going to do a lot of your work. Okay guys, we're back. I've went ahead and gave my aircraft a nice coat of paint. I've painted the bottom red. I've given myself some stripes here to give me some contrast in the sky. Also, the leading edge of the top is painted nice and bright red. I always like to paint the leading edge of my aircraft red, so when it's coming towards me, I know where it's at. And when you drop down below the horizon and there might be some mountains or something, you want that bright color to stand out so you know that your aircraft is coming back towards you. I've also gone ahead and done something a little bit special in this particular aircraft.